Welcome back to Smith History, separating the Smith from the myth. This is the only podcast where nostalgia is mandatory, fantasy football is sacred, and family memories are measured the same way our league measured punting average, precisely, proudly, and probably with one of my brothers arguing the math. Today's episode, buckle up. We're diving into two draft worlds. The NFL draft from the glory days of ESPN before it turned into a political talk show with shoulder pads, and the FFL draft. Yes, the FFL, the Smith Family Fantasy Football League, the original gridiron think tank founded in 1988 by the man, the myth, the commissioner, my brother Jeff. This was not a game of bingo. No spinning cages of luck. No, I guess I drew Barry Sanders type of draft. This was auction warfare. This was capitalism meets football. This was the New York Yankees of fantasy leagues. If George Steinbrenner had a fantasy football league. In this league, you needed a sense of humor and brothers willing to argue over 25-cent bidding increments. Let me set the scene. It's 1988. Hair was big, shorts were short, phones were attached to walls, and fantasy football, well, it barely existed in 1988. While America was still treating fantasy football like some experimental bingo night project for accountants, my brother Jeff was creating what would become one of the first auction-based fantasy leagues in the entire country. It wasn't luck. It wasn't random. It wasn't pick your number. This was pure strategy. Jeff's FFL turned fans into owners. And not pretend owners like today. I mean owners who paid real money for real NFL players in a live auction draft. In the beginning, players started out at 25 cents. But if you wanted to drop $100 on a team, Jeff said, sure, it's America. He eventually capped everything, but in the early days, it was football meets Wall Street. But with more arguing and fewer inside trading laws. This wasn't a boys' club for long. My wife Patty later became the first woman to break the FFL gender barrier. She was the Jackie Robinson of fantasy football, at least in our league. Except she also had to live with the owner she got beat by on Sundays. Over time, the league had everything. We had a board of directors, Jeff as the first commissioner, a statistician, helmet logos, team names and colors, and scoring categories no one else in the country had. And this is critical. The FFL didn't just score offense. We scored defense, special teams, punting, and field goals. You couldn't just draft offensive stars. You needed defensive touchdowns, interceptions, sacks, tackles, and yes, punting average. Because nothing says fantasy football like shouting at the TV, "Come on, punter, pin them in at the 10. While today's fantasy leagues let computers do all the work, our league used the most powerful computing device available, Jeff's brain, and the USA Today, and maybe a calculator bought at Radio Shack. Each category, from quarterback completions to defensive touchdowns, awarded 12 points for first place, 11 for second, all the way down. In our league, balance mattered, strategy mattered, and defense mattered. Many great offensive teams lost championships because their defense looked like they were playing two-hand touch. Later, Jeff added a head-to-head league on top of the categories league. It was 2 leagues for the price of 1. It was the inception of fantasy football, Smith style. A rare few owners won both in the same year. Some say it couldn't be done, but owners like Jeff and Rick said, just watch us. Now let's talk history. Rick, he was the Mavericks. He had the first FFL dynasty. Randy, the Twin Terror. He won the first head-to-head title by rattling off 10 straight wins like he was coached by Bill Walsh himself. And then there was me. In the early days, I was like the Buffalo Bills. I was called the bridesmaid of the FFL, the second place specialist, the man who could win everything except the thing he wanted. But then came the Roaring 20, my record-breaking stretch of 20 straight head-to-head wins and back-to-back titles, before Jeff's Reno casinos finally cracked the code and stopped me. And then finally I won my first FFL championship, coming from behind to beat those same casinos. Kyle introduced the league's sports banquet, and he became the first owner to go wire to wire for a title. And Dad lived for the FFL. He won 3 of 5 head-to-head titles, and he earned a Hall of Fame spot. He brought more enthusiasm than anyone else. His love of the league brought the family together every fall. And I was voted into the FFL Hall of Fame with my dad in 2013. Jeff and Rick were already in, both men who pulled off the ultra-rare double of winning FFL and head-to-head titles in the same season. In 2016 and 17, I joined them with back-to-back FFL titles. And I earned my 4th Executive of the Year award. Only this time it was the first unanimous Executive of the Year. And the man who announced my Hall of Fame induction, Aaron Snyder. Aaron was an FFL legend, a great friend, and a man who lost to COVID in 2020. He is deeply missed. Now let's shift to the other draft, the big one, the one that used to make April feel like Christmas morning. The 1990s ESPN NFL Draft, the golden era. You had Chris Berman, nicknaming players faster than the picks came in. Joe Theismann, who would argue with a mailbox if it talked back. Chris Mortensen, the gold standard of insiders. The draft sets that looked like a cable access show, but in a charming way. But there was no politics, no causes, no music festival, no blinding lasers of TikTok influencers screaming into the world, screaming into the void. Just football, just analysis, just the way it should be. And the greatest moment in NFL draft history? Oh, that's easy. 1994, Mel Kiper versus Bill Tobin. Tobin, the general manager of the Colts, furious and red as a tomato, and live on TV. Who the hell is Mel Kiper anyway? And Mel Kiper firing back with helmet hair that could survive a tornado. It was the peak draft television. And, to me, the peak of ESPN. Peak of America. My family treated the draft like it was a Super Bowl party. Dad and I, all the brothers, we crammed into the living room like it was an annual pilgrimage. That was back when draft weekend actually meant something. Time moves on, though, and And sometimes the things we love fade before we realize how precious they were. I've been in other fantasy leagues since then. I won wire to wire again on an internet league with my brothers Rick and Randy. It was fine, it was fun, but it wasn't Jeff's FFL. Nothing will ever replace that FFL, that fantasy football league. Because Jeff didn't just run the league, he trailblazed a lifestyle. He turned a hobby into a culture. He made Sundays special. He created something decades before fantasy experts pretended they invented it. From the first draft in Jeff's kitchen, to our banquet nights, to championship trophies, to our meeting at the Pro Football Hall of Fame in Canton, Ohio, to the laughter, the arguments, the celebrations, to Dad smiling bigger than anyone when draft day arrived. Those memories, they're not just part of our family history, they are our family history. And that, more than stats, more than titles, more than punting average, is what separates the Smith from the myth. Thanks for joining me on this walk through draft history, both the national kind and the kind that mattered most in the Smith household. Until next time, keep your family close, your fantasy roster balanced, your bidding smart, and your memories ready to replay like old game film. My name is Brian Smith, where family, football, and legends live forever, and where we always proudly separate the Smith from the myth.